Hello and welcome to Report Desk Africa on this new month of May. Yes, it's the first edition for the month of May. My name is Bernard Akede, and this, of course, if you're watching for the very first time, is the show on New Central Television where we bring you all the interesting and, should I say, juicy stories that have taken place across the continent of Africa all through the week up until this very moment. Again, my name is Bernard Akede. If you're meeting me for the first time, nice to meet you too. I never do this alone. There's a lovely lady who sits next to me.
I am the lovely lady. My name is Blessings Mosugu, and once again, happy new month to our viewer. Now, today's program, as always, promises to be insightful as we'll be taking you through stories making the headlines across Africa. That's what we do. Once again, my name is Blessings Mosugu. Now, we'll be going from the south to the west and, of course, the northern part of the continent. And today's reports will be looking at two major important stories, one of which is press freedom in Africa, and the other, the incessant building collapse in Nigeria. I mean, it's worth discussing. Now, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with reports and insight into these stories after the break. In case you're just joining us, this is Report Desk Africa with myself, Blessings, and Bennett. And once again, we're wishing you a happy new month on the show. Now, we'll be starting off talking about press freedom. Now, just some days ago, we celebrated World Press Day, Bennett.
Yeah, World Press Freedom Day.
Yeah, exactly. So, Bennett, what has been your experience in the press? I mean, being a media person that you are, what have you experienced when it comes to press freedom? How much of freedom would you say you have, especially in this country, to practice?
Well, I'd like to say, first of all, that Nigeria, media practitioners in Nigeria basically have it a bit easier than in some other parts of Africa, where press freedom has really been stifled. You see places in Africa where certain things are going on and then there's no access to the internet. Social media is completely blocked off. In Nigeria, I mean, we came back some months ago from a Twitter ban, but in some parts of Africa, it's complete blackout for social media during times of elections, during times of crisis, in certain parts of Africa. And then there also are the places where media practitioners are not even allowed to go in to cover certain stories, maybe because some of the government officials or some people in power are trying to prevent certain stories from getting out. But again, for me in Nigeria here, it's been pretty much easier than other parts of Africa. Of course, there still have been challenges for media practitioners here in Nigeria, and I think we can still do more. There clearly is room for improvement. But again, press freedom in Nigeria, I would say I'm really thankful that it's not so bad.
I was about to say that some countries have less press freedom than others, and I don't think it's that much in Nigeria.
All right. So, going forward, we have a small report, or a package, like we like to call it here, on press and media freedom. Remember, again, some days ago, we celebrated World Press Freedom Day, and even the United Nations put out a message concerning press freedom. Take a look at this report.
A free and open society is the bedrock of development, and only a positive disposition to the media can endanger such process. While journalists in different societies are regarded as the fourth estate of the realm as a result of their primary role to inform the society, unfortunately, the so-called society has not been nice to journalists in some climes.
On World Press Freedom Day, we shine a spotlight on the essential work of journalists and other media workers who seek transparency and accountability from those in power, often at great personal risk. Without freedom of the press, there are no real democratic societies. Without freedom of the press, there is no freedom.
Journalists are gradually becoming endangered species in Africa as they increasingly face all forms of threat in the course of their duty.
You find out that a journalist will be arrested, incarcerated for as long as possible. But, the compensations are not there. So because if the compensations are there, they themselves will be able to deter government officials from undertaking some of these malicious prosecutions.
With this year's World Press Freedom Day theme being journalism under digital siege, is it safe to say a more inclusive online platform has helped in providing journalists and media outlets with the support needed to survive the growing intimidation, harassment, threat and assault sweeping the continent?
We need to take note of cybercrime laws that are being enacted in the region, which continue to have laws or provisions that infringe on free expression. Of note also is the criminalization of falsehoods or publishing of false information, which we note actually promotes infringement of free expression and promotes self-censorship. So this is
much as the press faces a lot of oppression and repression from the authorities, the ownership structures of the media in Africa have been identified as another major hindrance to the attainment of a free press in Africa.
But most journalists that get molested are not working on their own. They're either working for the private media or the government media. Either way, we do not see enough commitment to the protection of journalists, to the extent that where journalists' rights are violated, hardly do you see media owners or media organizations deciding on their own that they would, for example, pursue the legal option to seek redress on behalf of these journalists.
Journalists and media workers shine a light on local, national and global challenges while telling the stories that need to be told. It is high time government and all stakeholders provide a policy framework for the protection and safety of journalists. Omolola Ololade reporting for News Central.
By the way, Omolola Ololade, who put that package together, is the amiable and honorable producer of the show. Thank you very much, Madam Producer. I'm sure we've given her enough press freedom. We don't stress her, do we?
Oh, wait, no, we don't.
No, we don't. And of course, well, we are not the only
but
ones.
she doesn't give us much freedom, especially when it comes to RDA, because it's always on our neck.
I'll put that down. Anyways, going forward, we are not the only ones who will be talking about press freedom. As a matter of fact, I would have loved for every journalist who I know to actually contribute to this particular conversation, but there's just so many people we can take. And of course, we can't continue this without having our very own Niyi Omoniyi. Niyi is back from, where did he go last time? Was it Togo or Mali? It was Togo.
Was it?
Yeah. Niyi, welcome back from Togo.
That was blessings, I know. Okay, it's okay, it's fine. I'm back in Nigeria for
Hi,
now.
Niyi.
Hi, blessings.
So now, Niyi, if you look at that report, and you probably could see the faces of different journalists, different media practitioners, and I came to notice one thing. Of all the journalists who were shown in that particular report, it was just you and I who were in crisis situations wearing bulletproof vests. The rest were sitting pretty in the office doing their journalism.
Yeah, both of you are
So
crisis reporters.
right. I think we are the ones that will talk about press freedom the most. So, Niyi, I'll throw it to you first of all. Basically, what do you think press freedom should be now in 2022 in Africa?
Well, the truth is, if we want to see from where we are coming from, especially in Nigeria, I speak for Nigeria now, yes, we've come a long way. There were times whereby as a journalist or as a media practitioner, you couldn't write things, especially in the military regime. True. During the Abacha era, you couldn't write things, you couldn't publish some things. Before you know it, when you say something, there was nothing like the civic space being safe. When you say some things, yes, the SSS will be after you in days. In fact, before you step out of that same auditorium, the SSS will have been on your neck. But now, it's not like that. It's not where it should be, but yeah, it's not like as it used to be. I was reading recently a report by Reporters Without Borders. Nigeria now ranks 129, as against 120 last year. I'm sure the NSAS crisis also affected it because we went down that line. But sincerely, Nigeria's come a long way, but a lot is still being done to stifle or stagnates the kind of freedom the press has in the country. And the truth is the press are still open or open to a lot of damages, a lot of which has also hampered the way they go about their duties. Journalists are now more in their shells. Yes, some are actually going out of their shells to get the story out and to ensure that the people are informed, but more people are now scared, especially with the scenario of the NSAS protest that happened in 2020, and of course the memorial that also happened in 2021. A lot of journalists were armed. I personally, when I was working on the report for the NSAS protest, I was trying to speak with a journalist who was maltreated, but he didn't want to show on air. because of fear, and even his voice, he had to tell me to help him change his voice, do a voice breakdown and all those things. So a lot of Nigerian journalists, I would say, still live in fear, and there will be the case of owners of these media stations, and there are times whereby you want to go for a story, you want to get to you have the power to seek the truth, but when you now seek the truth, your media station does not allow you to do it, maybe based on political will or political affiliation and a whole lot of things. So yeah, as I said earlier, we are not where we were, but of course, we still have a lot to do.
Niyi, before you join in on the show, I was speaking with Bennett, and I said some countries have, more hindrances to press freedom than others. And, I remember reading in the news today, and I read about at least 2 journalists who are serving up to 15-year jail term because they incited agitations of people, and not exactly inciting agitations. They just gave the truth as it was. But, some people in government felt offended by that. So would you say that the problem is from people in power, like the government? Because journalists are supposed to be the bridge, the gap between the government and the people in the society. So if we as journalists want to tell the truth, would you say our major hindrances come from the people in power trying to hinder us, trying to, tame us and tell us what to do, when to do it, and or why not to do it?
I can say personally, my own opinion now, categorically, I can say fighting for to protect the civic space, which is where people get right to freedom of speech, expression, and all those things, is similar to fighting for independence, especially in the African setting. And that's the truth, because you have to contend with a lot of political powers. Outside the country, I was watching recently, the United States of America had White House correspondent dinner, and, they were all there just free, talking to each other. And yes, I've watched some of their stories. I've gone through some of their bulletins, some of their reports. It doesn't still stop these reporters or correspondents from going after the truth and seeking it and ensuring that they hold these political officers accountable. And that will be because their judicial system is actually working. But in Africa here, we noticed that there's these, maybe because the judicial system, the judicial part, we have the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, maybe because they don't have financial autonomy. And of course, the executive can rule or can overturn in one way or sabotage the influence of the judiciary, which makes it hard for people to get justice. And of course, when you can't get justice, there's a level of what you can do. Now, you're speaking about some reporters being maltreated, maybe in some African countries. Even recently, I heard reporters were also maltreated in one African country recently, and nothing was done about it. I did a story recently on Uganda as well about 4 reporters were killed, 2 maltreated. Even in Togo as well, political wills, they can't say anything. They are hiding because of the kind of power that is currently ruling the country. Yes, the political influence is strong, and we really predict if people can do much. And any reporter, as I said earlier, or journalist that would want to really, really deliver would need to sacrifice a lot. But the question would now be, who wants to go to that sort of extent when he or she knows that justice won't be served at the end of the day?
Exactly. I think I totally agree with you talking about justice being served. I mean, we've seen such happen in Nigeria here. You rightly mentioned a while ago, you talked about the NSAS protest in 2020, the NSAS memorial in 2021, and then there's the one that I was at the Democracy Day, I believe it was. Some journalists were shot at, tear gassed, some were picked up, some were harassed, beaten, and all whatnot. And then, sadly, again, sometimes I think information is key. Now, some of the security operatives who actually, would I call it a crime, who actually, met out some kind of unnecessary disciplinary measures on journalists and kind of stifle their efforts from saying what they should say. Some of them may not know better. Of course, it's getting better now in Nigeria, like we clearly have stated. But also, there's something I want to bring up, which was stated in that report that we saw. And I think you also mentioned it, the ownership of media organizations. Now, you have people who own media houses, not wanting any problems with the government. So that also is some kind of press control as regards press freedom.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily only from the government and from security operatives, but sometimes from the owners as well, where we've seen, it used to be worse, back in the day, especially in print media, where journalists are trying to write and publish some stories, and then it goes through their desk editors, and then possibly even through the owners of the media houses, where they say, no, this story must not go out. Because it's possible that the owners of these media houses have some kind of affiliation or have some kind of relationship with certain persons whom the stories might be about.
True, and that happens a lot.
Yeah.
That really happens. You know, I worked with a small media outlet some time ago, and you know, there was this religious story that was circulating. Usually, we put out stories as it comes, but because, you know, there was this, like you said, an affiliation with the people concerned, the story was killed at the spot. So,
let me give you a scenario, Blessing.
Yeah.
So I was, as I said earlier, I was covering a report recently that has to do with protecting the civic space, which of course deals with the ability of people to be informed, and of course positioning the media to be at the forefront of protecting that civic space. And one of the human rights lawyer there, representing the NBA, actually said something. He said during the NSAS protest, a journalist from one of the reputable stations in Nigeria was not only beaten but harassed. Now, the person didn't take it up, reported to the officials, the authorities in the station, and they just, you know, it's okay, if it's one of those things we say on the job, just okay, just take care of yourself. They actually took care of him and paid for his hospital bills. Now, he, as an human rights lawyer, went to the station. He said he went to the media station and said he wanted to take up the case for free, pro bono. He wants to take up the case and he wants to ensure that justice is done. To his greatest surprise, the station told him no. And he was wondering why. And these are some of the things we see over time that now makes you think, okay, is it worth it?
Yeah.
Why should I go through all the stress? And he gave other similar experiences, like, okay, during the NSAS protest too, some stations were also sanctioned. NBC, the National Broadcasting Commission, sanctioned some stations. He said he went to some of those stations to tell them he wants to take up the case. And he made it obvious that these security operatives or these people, sometimes they don't even know what their right is, and they're actually scared to go to court. But we as individuals and media journalists don't know that there are some things that are available for us. Do you know that as a journalist, you have the right to seek an asylum? There are people who actually seek asylum. You want to work on an investigative project. There are people who can fund it, who are ready to protect you, who can actually, in Nigeria, but at the same time, just as some of us don't have, we're not privy to this information, we don't know how to go about them. And it's part of what is also hindering our jobs.
For that, there should be more awareness, because for journalists, it's a very dicey situation, right?
Yeah.
So when these kind of things are happening, some journalists are confused, some media houses are confused. And then there's something they say when they say your freedom of speech can be guaranteed, but your freedom after speech is not guaranteed. It's funny, but it's true. Because we've seen a lot of journalists who cover stories, I mean, the freedom of speech is there, so they cover the stories, and before you know, they go missing. And after some months, they're found dead.
You went to cover a story, and before you left there, one of the security operatives is coming to tell. These are things we've seen on the field. Okay, one of the security operatives is coming to tell you that thing must not be there.
I'll get to that. As a matter of fact, I was going to tell my own story about that. But before then, guys, we have award-winning journalist, investigative journalist Kunle Akinriade. He was supposed to join us earlier. I hear Kunle is now with us online. Kunle, good evening. Good evening, Kunle. Can you hear me? Kunle, can you hear me, please? Okay, so it appears that we may still be having some challenges connecting with Kunle Akinriade. Kunle was the winner of the 2021 Wole Soyinka Center of Investigative Journalism Award. And he clearly is somebody who has experienced, he has his own stories to tell when it comes to press freedom, definitely. Now, coming back to what you were saying, Niyi, while we still try to connect with Kunle Akinriade, yes, these are things that even I have seen covering certain stories, and then you have particularly security operatives come up to you and say, delete that footage. Now, it doesn't even have to be in crisis situations. It just has to be in a situation where certain persons feel that what they are doing should not be put out. Now, if you know that you're doing the right thing, you shouldn't be scared to have your face put out there. Certain times, there once was a time during the fuel crisis where myself and the camera operator were actually moved into a small room, and we had certain soldiers go through the camera to ensure that the footage that we took, they were not in our footage. And then we had to delete certain things. Of course, in such cases, you have to play smart and you have to play safe.
First.
You know, it's better to be safe than to be sorry.
I mean,
Again,
imagine having to do what favors everybody. Then
exactly.
that's not journalism.
Then the news is not out
It doesn't
eventually.
work. As a reporter, you need to give a balanced, fair report. And you see, this is one of the issues also, and I think this is part of the things that escalated the NSAS protest. And this being told is the truth. During the NSAS protest, a lot of people blamed some media houses for not reporting some stories or for just reporting the government side of the story. But they failed to realize that as a reporter or as a journalist, for you to get a balanced story, you need to hear from everybody. Yours is to lay the facts out there, but not to judge. You can't take sides. It's the profession, it's the ethics of the job.
All right, so Niyi, let's try to connect with Kunle Akinriade again. Kunle, if you can hear me, could you kindly connect your audio, please? And maybe you may want to take off your headset if you are using one. It's possible that the audio you are receiving is not clear because of the headset connection. So maybe we could just use your audio directly from your device.
I think can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you now.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, Kunle.
Good afternoon. Good evening. How are you doing? Sorry, I came on behind schedule. You know, I was in transit and, you know, I couldn't
That's completely fine.
settle down properly.
That's fine. You're welcome on the show.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for bringing me on to this evening.
All right, Kunle, before you joined in, we were having a... Sorry, could you say that again?
I'm not prepared to listen to conversation, so perhaps you can do me a recap so that I can...
Oh, yeah, sure, definitely. So before you joined in, we're talking about press freedom and, you know, the challenges journalists have had, the challenges media houses have had in general. And we're talking about how, you know, some people want things to favor them, things that we put out as media organizations. And sometimes, you know, you go to cover events and some people ask you, some uniformed men ask you to take down whatever it is you've put out because it probably does not favor them. And then we're talking about how, you know, over time it has, you know, in some places gotten better, but in other places it just gets worse. You see journalists serving time in jail because they unknowingly incited violence or, you know, some things that just trigger government or some organizations that, you know, put journalists in trouble. So we're talking about how dicey the situation is. And Kunle, as someone who has, been on this journey of unraveling the truth for a while now, you're an award-winning journalist, and well done, by the way. Can you tell us a bit of your experience so far when it comes to press freedom and how it's been for you?
Okay. Once again, thank you very much for bringing me on to your show. This is my maiden appearance here, and it's one
pleasure.
of those topics that I like to, you know, speak on. See, I always tell people, if you subscribe to an endeavor, a profession or occupation, you must have a prior idea of what it entails. And, you know, you don't go to a profession without cognizance of the good side and the hazard. And then the hazard has always been there, but can it in any way deter you from, you know, going ahead with your job? Certainly no. And that is why you see that some people take up the responsibility to protect the society as policemen or circuit police or, you know, as a soldier. So you say, oh, when you are called up to do your job, oh, I can't carry gun, I can't kill people. Journalism all over the world is a profession that offers you the opportunity to dig deep into, you know, activities of the leadership. In essence, it is a profession. Once you subscribe to it, you can't make the leaders comfortable in their bed. It would be wrong of any journalist to make leaders, you know, cozy in their bed. It means that the person that you are trying to expose or question or interrogate his activities will also not be happy. So, and that is the reason why you have the hazards. And that is the reason why journalists get killed, brutalized, and manhandled by state actors. And even non-state actors, because we have instances whereby non-state actors, perhaps who have sympathy for those in the corridors of power, who unleash, horror on journalists. For me, I've had those experiences in the last 2 decades, and those experiences are what I consider as tonic for me to continue to do the needful as my own contributions to the uplift of the society.
Okay.
Journalists all over the world are subjected to horror. Just yesterday, there was a report around Dogba, a journalist was passing there, and then who saw a particular local council chair who against the traffic. He took a one-way and he was stopped by the police, and he tried to, having identified him to be a local council chairman. The journalist intend to just, take the story, and he was slapped by thugs loyal to the politician. So those are some of the experiences. In my own case, I have had direct confrontations with security. For the fact, when I started as a young reporter, that was my first experience at Akede, and it was a very. But today, I decide not to even do anything anymore just because of that first impression. Perhaps I would not have been able to help some people with my reports or stories. So hazards, in any case, should not in any way deter journalists from continuing to ensure that we have a better society. Just like last year when I ran a report which fetched me the Wale Soyinka Award, I ran the report for 5 weeks, for 3 months. It was a 5-part story which, published across three months from January to March, and which actually yielded fruit. But along the line, you see soldiers threatening you. You have turned the story into what they called erroneously as campaign. In fact, in one of the reports that I read, one of the petitions to the leadership of NUJ, they said I was struggling to blackmail the military. And I laughed. How could I struggle to blackmail the military when it was obvious that soldiers went to particular communities and brutalized residents just because they disallowed herders, herdsmen, from coming to graze on their farmland? So, but the evidence was there, and I used it, sufficiently to drive home, my point in that story that there was brutality. It has gone beyond the allegations, and, the Senate took a better position to say, no, that has to stop. A panel was, convocated by the Ogun State government to actually investigate the role of soldiers in that episode. And at the end of the day, there was justice for residents of 29 communities in Yewa area of Ogun State.
All right,
So,
Kunle, I would like to interject here, if you don't mind. I apologize because of time that we have. Now, we were speaking earlier before you came on that press freedom, it does not only have to do with the security operatives or government officials. Sometimes ownership of media houses could also play a part when it comes to press freedom or the lack of press freedom. Now, I want to ask you, and this probably will be my final question to you. Talking about ownership, would you say that the ownership and the structure of certain media organizations in Africa, could also hinder press freedom? Now, we've seen cases where certain journalists would like to push forth some stories or like to chase some kind of investigative pieces, like some of the things that you have done. But of course, many of these journalists are not independent. They work for certain media houses, be it print or electronic. And nowadays, we also have online media as well. In trying to push for this story, sometimes the ownership would stifle the abilities of such journalists. What part does this also play in press freedom, basically?
Yeah, you're talking about editorial independence, and that is critical to the performance of journalists in our society. Let me correct the impression that that is peculiar to Nigeria alone or Africa. It is global. In America, different media organizations have sympathy for different political groups and organizations. The line told by Washington Post is different from New York. Both of them oscillate between the Democrats and then the conservatives. So it is a big problem, and also speak to why you have having sympathy for either conservative or the CNN having sympathy for the Democrats. So it is not peculiar to Nigeria alone. It is a general global problem. But if you put it on scale, how as much, we exhibit it flagrantly with impunity. You understand? With impunity in Nigeria. Probably because those who are the real owners of media organizations are deep pockets, who majorly or predominantly are politicians or who belongs to who have political leanings. So it is huge. The influence is huge. Let me say, from my own experience, I think one thing a journalist should do is to avoid being stupid. Once the management of any media organization know that you are upright and that you don't compromise, I'm not sure that that is what we get all the time. For instance, when I heard that was last year, one would have expected that because that was one thing that the state government also used, to harass, try to influence the stoppage of that report after the second edition was, published. You see, they said, maybe this state is an APC state. They were surprised that other media organizations were not doing story. That, the Nation was the only newspaper organization doing such stories. So it appears as if a dog is trying to eat another dog. So, but they gave me the approval to continue in the interest of the people whose lives are being endangered by the activities of herdsmen. That is on one side. In 2014, that was the first time I won Wole Soyinka Award. So I write a report on the activities of a certain cement manufacturing company, same in Ogun State. And the same excuse that the state government used that turned it into a campaign because that ran for like 7 weeks. So, and, company came and trying to influence because they were giving us adverts then. They were giving us a weekly ad strip on the cover of our paper. First, they stopped the advert, thinking that would make, compel the management to actually ask me to stop the series that was running. Or now, their operations have been ravaging the environment around the state community. So that didn't happen. Yes, they wrote asking for a courtesy visit. The management of that cement company wanted to pay us a courtesy visit in the office. But the management of our media organization refused, saying that the time was not right to actually accede to the request for a courtesy visit. And then the next thing is that they tried to bribe and they offered money. But I refused. And they made it very clear. The management knew that, they've been asking you to take money so that you can kill the story. The story that is being funded by the same media organization. So, in a way, I think the trust must be there from the end of the management to the reporter.
All right, thank you so much, Kunle. Thank you so much for
people who are
your info.
involved
Because of our time,
in
we
that
have to stop
investigative.
here. Really apologize, but thank you so much for joining us on the show, and thanks for giving in your own side of the entire story. Thank you. And also want to thank Niyi Omoniyi for joining us to discuss press freedom. Of course, we're going to have him come back again for our next discussion. This is still Report Desk Africa. Stay tuned for more. You're still watching Report Desk Africa. If you're just joining us, I wouldn't say you haven't missed much, but there's still a lot more to talk about. Now, we'll be going to the western part of Africa, where we'll be looking at Nigeria precisely. Now, one of the major issues that Nigeria has recorded over time has been the issue of destroyed buildings or collapsed buildings, should I say. Now, this story is about a building that collapsed in Ebute Metta, a three-story building that collapsed in Ebute Metta, where at least 10 people were confirmed dead after the incident in Lagos. Now, this latest incident is the second building collapse to be recorded in Yaba, Ebute Metta axis of the state in almost 3 months, and it has become a recurring issue. Let's take a look at this report.
It is a feeling of deja vu for residents of Lagos, as once again they are counting their losses and counting the dead. A three-story building that housed residential apartments and shops came crashing down at about 9:15 p.m. Sunday night. One of the survivors tells his story.
I slept off faintly before I heard the voice. And I said, what is that? But what I saw and what I imagined, that the building is collapsing. And I was naked. So when we reach ground, I now make sure that I don't put fear in my mind, that what will be. But people came to rescue me.
As rescue workers dig through the rubble in search of possible survivors or the remains of those who have died, they tell us that the building was a disaster waiting to happen.
So when we got there, at that time, we were having close to 20 people rescued. So at the end, so far, we have 23 people rescued alive and 8 people recovered dead. Out of the 8, 3 females, 5 males were recovered dead. Operations are still ongoing. We don't know whether we can still see more or not.
Since yesterday, we've been using different equipment, sophisticated equipment, Delta equipment, light duty equipment, heavy duty equipment, and we are cruising to the ground zero. At certain quadrants, we've got to the ground zero, and we are moving to all quadrants to ground zero. So I can say it loud and clear that our operation is swift, prompt, effective, and efficient.
While the digging continued, there was a sudden agitation as another, already marked as unsafe, was discovered just around the corner. Looking old and rugged, parts of the building crumbled as we watched. The authorities sent an excavator to the building to pass what may be a final warning to the occupants. A 7-day ultimatum is all they have.
Excavators and heavy equipment are now being moved out of this second location. Now, the government agencies say that the aim of this was never to demolish this building while the occupants were still inside, but that if this move was not taken, the occupants will remain in this building that already has been marked for demolition and will not move an inch. But now we see that buildings like these clearly need to be taken care of, either demolished or reinforced.
Back at the site of the collapsed building, shop owners could be seen salvaging what was left of their wares. Damaged generators, motorcycle parts, and other items were pulled out of the rubble, some completely destroyed. Then suddenly, some movement is noticed. Hopes rise, perhaps another survivor. But sadly, the body of a little girl is pulled out of the rubble, bringing the death toll to 9.
We, the government, we should go and make sure we check all the houses. This particular one, they've marked it 3 times that they should evacuate, and our community itself. That's why we are going to make sure we talk to them. We are going to have stakeholders meeting. If you see what has happened to them now, it's very unfortunate. If you see and you don't talk, this type of thing will continue happening.
As rescue workers dig relentlessly to ensure any possible survivor is rescued, Nigerians say the appropriate agencies need to properly check landlords and property developers so that cases like this will not be repeated. Bernard Akede, New Central Lagos. Quite a sad one there. I personally covered that story, and I know how very depressing stories like that could be, especially when you relate it to the one that happened on the 1st of November last year, where the 17, I believe it was again, uncompleted story building came down in Ikoyi axis of Lagos. Now, we won't be talking about this alone. We will be joined once again by our own correspondent, Niyi Omoniyi, who also covered part of the Ikoyi building collapse. Niyi, good to have you back.
Welcome back, Niyi.
Yeah.
All right, now, Niyi, very quickly, sadly, we don't have so much time. This would have been, a topic that we would have loved to really sink our teeth into and give a lot of bites. But Niyi, basically, now we're seeing, building collapses in different parts of Nigeria happening over and over again. Like Blessing said, it's also almost becoming a recurring decimal. While we are not building engineers, one thing is certain. The common factor amongst most of them is, trying to cut corners. Either the landlords or the developers using substandard materials or employing quacks, like some have said. But then there's something I want to talk about, Niyi. Now, the housing system, particularly in a mega city like Lagos, there are so many who have complained about proper accommodation. You think this might be part of the reason why when certain buildings are already marked for demolition or marked as unsafe, certain people decide to still remain in there and risk their lives rather than look for alternative accommodation?
Thank you for that, Ben. For once, I see that we're looking at another angle to this, which is quite important as well. So it's not just about the building being distressed, it's also about the people, because I worked with LAPSCA, the Lagos State Building Control Agency, at some points during my career, and I could say for fact that they go around marking this distressed building and serve these occupants ultimatum to leave, even months, and they refuse to do that. Now, data shows that as at 2015, Lagos had 15.3 million people in. And Lagos is a coastal city. Come on, there's no land anywhere. There's a saying that goes, okay, if you can't buy land, don't worry, you later buy a house. Okay, that could happen. But if we're talking about housing, Lagos can only account for like 1.63 million housing stock units that are available. And at least it needs over 4.6 million housing units. That means we have a deficit of over 3.2 million housing deficit. And this is a major concern. So as much as they want to, these buildings have been marked distressed and people are being chased out, the streets are already flooded with people. The bridges are flooded with people. And people keep trooping into Lagos as a metropolitan area, the biggest in Africa, every day, thinking it's the best place to make money. And of course, it's the land of opportunity. And they keep coming in. Now, there's a lot of things that need to be considered. One, regulation of people, migration of people into Lagos State. First thing that should be looked at. The second will also be that what is the provision? Now, imagine for people who have nowhere to go, who have been given just 7 days ultimatum. And yeah, I can't blame the Lagos State government because they are bound to protect lives and property, but for them, the priority is life, okay, before property. Now, for the person who is living in that kind of place, is not, as far as he's alive, the next priority for him is property, which is the way he has aligned his scale of preference. But this change or these issues about priority is what is still giving us challenges, especially in Lagos State. Aside the fact that, some building developers have issues with getting the right materials, even some, the Lagos State physical and urban planning departments also vets this thing. Some of them have boycotts. Some of them have people who just issue papers. There's a lot of things going on around this thing. It's Lagos. Some people just pay their way through. I said it earlier while I was working with LAPSCA, there was a house that was marked for over 3 months, and when we got there as LAPSCA, we were wondering why the house was not brought down already. But the person keeps, paying, renewing, there's this system that goes on, and it still boils down to corruption in the system.
Yeah, now, Niyi, quickly, because of our time, talking about the collapsed buildings, now, you covered the event, the disaster at Ikoyi when a building collapsed, 17-story, I think, building collapsed. And now there is this one. Would you say there are any similarities between both incidents when it comes to the cause of the event?
Well, for this one, we know for sure it was marked distressed, and people have been served quick notice to leave that building. For the Ikoyi, the engineer from the side of the government and the paperwork from the side of the government suggests that the person has been advised to stop operation because it has gone beyond the speculated approved level of building.
Yeah.
And yes, all these things came down at the same time. So I would say it's similar because approval was not gotten at some point to this building, and they've been advised against leaving or continual operation in that house. So yes, there's something similar, and more of it might still happen because as long as these distressed buildings are out there, do you know how many buildings are in Ibda, Ebutemeta, especially in Lagos, Isaleko, all those places? There are a lot of buildings there that, you know, if you go in there and you see the condition of the houses, some of them are tilting like there was the Eiffel Tower. You know, they're already tilting this way, and people are still living there with their kids. In fact, as I said earlier, while I was working with Lapscar, there was a particular building the excavator was about to demolish, and two children actually ran out of the building just as the excavator was about to demolish it. And nobody even knew. After passing warnings, that same day, the officials still went in, cleared the place. Kids were there with their father and their mother, and they refused to come out.
So that's another thing. You know, even certain buildings that have been abandoned, you know, in the process of construction that have never been completed, you still have people living in such buildings.
Yes.
I know that Lagos State government has tried to evacuate people from abandoned buildings. There's been a plan to do that, but of course, it's one thing to plan to do something, it's another thing to actually execute it. Before we let go, and I feel so bad that we were not able to completely dissect this matter. Guys, now we all live in Lagos, and God forbid something happens to the building where you are staying, and the government comes and says, we give you 7 days to vacate this building. I know how difficult it will be for me to move out of my own place of abode in 7 days. And that's what some people were given. Right. Do you think that there could be an alternative? Do you think that there's something else that the government can do or that anyone can do to help people who sadly have been living in buildings that have been marked as distressed buildings? What can be a possible solution? Now, I personally, I had this conversation with someone recently, and she said maybe the government can produce some kind of temporary abode for people to live in. But of course, we know again that we all are Oliver Twist. Give us an inch, we take a whole mile. So give people temporary abode, it becomes permanent abode.
Yes,
so can there possibly be a solution for people who sadly have rented apartments in distressed buildings and they've been asked to evacuate?
Well, the very, very rare cases...
We have just 2 minutes.
Yeah, the very, very rare cases I've seen that Lagos State government has provided this temporary abode that you've mentioned is in cases of bomb blasts, in cases of very, very bad situations. And yes, they provide these stuff like the Abule Ado fire explosion, and they created this temporary place for people to stay. But just as you said earlier, there is an imminent abuse naturally, and people want to stay there for longer or even try to boycott the system. And the Lagos State government can actually do it. But the question will be for how many people? And even if they can do it for how many people and they can sustain it and have the money, the housing is not still there.
Well, to be honest, in conclusion, I think the major problem we face in Lagos is overpopulation.
Exactly.
There's this way they paint
and
Lagos to people, and that's what they told me
Lagos is even encroaching into the waters.
Very true. Sadly, I think it's time we learn from other urban cities, other cities that are becoming mega cities, megalopolis as they call them, and see how best Lagos can. I mean, the government of Lagos State is trying, but there's just so much they can do. There's still room for improvement. Niyi, we have just a few seconds. It's time for us to look into the forecast for next week.
Yes, into our crystal ball. Of course, the United Nations have once again condemned. Okay, I'll take this first. 46 people have joined the race for Kenya's presidency. And of course, this has been among the over 7,000 cleared to vie in August 9 general elections in Kenya. The independent aspirants include 106 governors, 147 senators, 110 women reps, 958 members of the National Assembly, and over 5,000 members of the Country Assembly. Now, that is an election
Kenya's #1 position.
An election to look out for. And of course, the African Union and United Nations have condemned solely the attack of Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Now, this has been going on for a long time. I remember the 2015 explosion of a university, and now they're really taking a stand, and the international bodies are taking a stand on it as militants suggest that the number of peacekeepers killed is much higher than the Burundi government is reporting. And of course, the crisis in Niger, UN calls on international community to invest in helping Niger's army in its fight against terrorism. You know, it affects Niger, it affects every other African country because it borders other African countries, and these are stories we should look out for in the coming week.
All right, thank you so much, Niyi, Omoniyi, and thank you to our guest earlier, Kunle, Akinriade. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Thank you so much, Blessings Mosugu, sitting next to me. We have to run out before our producer kicks us out of the show, and we begin to do stories of press freedom again. We do hope that you join us again same time next week, same station. My name is Bernard Akede. On behalf of cast and crew of the show, do have a lovely evening.